listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, Erin Patterson has been sentenced to life for murdering 3 people and attempting to murder another with her deadly beef Wellington dish at her Leongatha home in July 2023. With no remorse or emotion, even during today's sentencing, some experts say Erin displays key symptoms of a narcissistic psychopath. But will we ever know why she murdered her loved ones? And will Erin appeal? We're joined by a top criminologist for her analysis. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Monday, the 8th of September. Fugitive father Tom Phillips has been shot dead in a gunfight with police in New Zealand. Police say Phillips, who vanished into the bush with his 3 children in 2021, opened fire after allegedly robbing a rural supplies store in the village of Pew Pew earlier this morning. One police officer is in a serious condition after being shot in the head during the confrontation. Authorities say Phillips was fleeing on a quad bike with one of his children when road spikes stopped them, sparking the deadly shootout. A number of Sydney's northern beaches were closed today after a massive shark was spotted in the water just days after a fatal attack at Dee Why. Lifeguards ordered swimmers and surfers out of the water after the New South Wales Shark Smart app reported a tagged shark. The closure comes after 57-year-old surfer Mercury Salakis was fatally mauled by what was believed to be a great white shark at Longreef Beach on Saturday. Authorities are monitoring the coast as shark activity remains high. And Ariana Grande has taken home the night's biggest prize at the 2025 VMAs, winning Video of the Year. Lady Gaga scored Artist of the Year, while Sabrina Carpenter nabbed Best Album. Mariah Carey stole the show at this year's Video Vanguard honoree, performing a medley of her hits before winning her first ever VMA. There was also a star-studded tribute to the late Ozzy Osbourne and notably absent Taylor Swift. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on the sentencing of triple murderer Erin Patterson. Justice Christopher Beale today sentencing the 50-year-old to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 33 years. The justice scathing in his comments, saying Erin showed no remorse and the 3 murders and attempted murder of her relatives were premeditated.
How anyone could sit there and watch those 4 kind and caring people eat that meal. Your failure to exhibit any remorse pours salt into all the victims' wounds.
The sole survivor, Ian Wilkinson, spoke outside court after the sentencing, thanking Victoria Police and health authorities that cared for his dying wife and other relatives after they ate the deadly mushroom meal.
Please, each one, accept my sincere gratitude for the part that you have played in this process. We're thankful that when things go wrong, there are good people and services and systems available to help us recover.
We now know Erin did murder her in-laws Don and Gail Patterson and Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson and attempted to take the life of Ian. Today she was sentenced to life for those horrific crimes.
The total effective sentence is life imprisonment, and I fix a non-parole period of 33 years.
But some key questions remain, like why did Erin murder her relatives and will she appeal her conviction? Criminologist Xanthe Mallett joins us to unpack today's historic developments. Xanthe, thanks so much for joining us. We have been awaiting this sentence of Erin Patterson. We know she was found guilty of 3 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. What were your initial thoughts as this sentence was handed down?
Well, the judge was very condemning, wasn't he, in, I would say, the first 2/3 of the sentencing hearing, which went for about 45 minutes, as the court had actually predicted. So he was speaking about all of the aggravating factors initially. So the fact that, this was a really significant breach of trust, the level of trauma, the lack of any form of guilt or remorse, even after the fact, when she could have potentially provided information which could have changed the medical outcome by changing changing the procedure the hospital would have gone through had they known what the toxin was. So there were so many steps when she could have changed her mind and undone some of the harm. And she chose not to. She chose to continue lying. And he did speak about the victim impact statements. So he summarized those and really the breadth of trauma that this woman has caused, not just to the primary victims, but much wider than that across the families, the Pattersons and Wilkinsons, and into the community. So that really struck me. But then he moved on, didn't he, to talk about how she will be suffering in prison and talked about some of those mitigating factors which would bring the sentencing down a little bit. So it was certainly an interesting step through the trial, which lasted for 9 weeks in the end.
Xanthe, in regards to the Justice's comments, Justice Beale's comments, he was incredibly scathing. And I'm paraphrasing here, saying that Erin showed zero remorse. It was premeditated. And that he even referred to, which was quite an interesting analogy, that she sat across the table from her in-laws and her relatives, knowing they were consuming a meal that had been laced with death cap mushrooms, and that showed no guilt or remorse for what she was seeing unfold before her very eyes, knowing literally the deadly consequences of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he was very scathing, wasn't he? And I think he really wanted to put the victims front and center of the discussion because obviously, this was such a torturous death. He also mentioned the children and the ongoing impact it will have on them and the level of media interest and how the family are really going to struggle to escape this even now. So yes, he certainly indicated to start with that, this was at the more serious level of murder because of that total lack of remorse and the level of premeditation and the lies. And so, yes, he was quite brutal actually in those first stages, but fair, brutal but fair.
As we know, Xanthe, Ian Wilkinson was the sole survivor of that lethal mushroom meal. He made a very emotional speech outside court, which took so many people by surprise because that's the first time we've actually heard from him. He spoke about kindness and gratitude and thanked so many people.
Our lives and the life of our community depends on the kindness of others. I'd like to encourage everybody to be kind to each other.
In regards to finding out, everyone's talking about a motive now. The question still is, why did Erin do this? What are your thoughts on that? Why do you think Erin did this?
Well, there's only one person who knows why they would do something so abhorrent, and she is still not sharing that information. And I don't know that we'll ever really get to the bottom of that. But for me, regardless of what she could say, what she could offer as a motive, is there anything genuinely that could help us understand how somebody could do this? Because I just can't imagine what she would say that would make any rational person go, okay, now I'm beginning to understand. I just think it's so inexplicable that you and I, whatever she may say, would still simply be absolutely aghast at what she has done.
Xanthe, one of your colleagues, criminal psychologist Tim Watson-Munro, spoke with us earlier today and told me he believes with what he knows and what he's observed with Erin's behaviour, with the no remorse, that it was premeditated and no emotion in court today. He believes she has tendencies of being a narcissistic psychopath. Would you agree?
Well, I would say that obviously I don't believe she's been formally assessed. No medical evidence was led at the pre-sentencing, so no psychiatric or psychological evaluation was entered at sentencing. So no discussion of that by the justice today is in terms of a mitigating factor, for example. But certainly the level of emotional detachment that she's displayed, or certainly remorse, guilt, etc. I think potentially there was a lot of rage involved with what she did, but she does seem to exhibit the characteristics of that narcissistic psychopath, the narcissist who's someone who believes they can get away with it. They think they're superior. I think we saw that coming out in court. And honestly, I don't think she believed she was ever going to get caught, actually. I think she believed she was going to get away with it. She was going to outmaneuver the authorities. And I think that's her narcissistic personality potentially on display. And the cold, premeditated nature exhibits that potential psychopathic tendencies. But as I say, I don't believe she's been assessed, but certainly she would seem to fit that pattern.
Xanthe, why hasn't Erin been assessed? Because it's interesting to note again today in the sentencing, it was mentioned there'd been no official tendering of any evidence regarding Erin's possible psychiatric or mental health issues. Why would that be?
Well, we have to remember that she would have had to agree to be assessed. It would have been offered to her in case there were any factors that the judge needed to consider in sentencing that may have actually brought her sentence down, for example. But she has to be willing to engage with that process. It's a medical procedure at the end of the day, and it can't be forced upon her. So I'm guessing it would be speculation, but I imagine she refused the psych evaluation. And it's not the first time we've seen a killer do this. Ivan Milat, for example, I think also refused any kind of psych evaluation around sentencing for the judge to take into consideration. So I'm not actually surprised that no medical evidence was led, because I think that goes again back to her personality and not wanting to engage with that process.
We always have to mention, and I know you do mention it often, Xanthe, there are so many victims. There are 3 or 4 generations, Justice Beale mentioned today, that have been forever changed and devastated by the murderous actions of Erin Patterson. We also know there are 2 children there. Do you think in the concept of, and we don't know what's going on in Erin's mind, that she seemed to be quite a present mother from all reports, that played into any of it, the fact that she killed her children's grandparents, and her actions will ensure she doesn't see her children for 30 years?
Well, I don't think that, I mean, again, I would be guessing, but from what we've seen of Erin, I don't believe she would have maybe considered that during the act or even afterwards, because I think she fully expected to get away with this. But given she is spending 22 hours out of 24 in a cell all by herself, she has very little human contact, that's been the circumstance for 15 months now, then I imagine in that time she has had a chance to consider the fact that she has taken herself away as a mother from her children. They are now in the sole custody of their father. And when you speak about the ongoing impact, the children's identity is being very protected. However, they're going to have to live in that community. The media is still going to be interested. It's a conversation everywhere. It's going to be really difficult for them to move forward. And you're saying 4 generations impacted. I would argue that actually what has happened in the Wilkinson and Patterson family will impact them for generations to come through intergenerational trauma. I've worked with lots of families where somebody has died, and even the children who weren't alive at the time and the grandchildren, the trauma is in that family. So the impact cannot be overestimated.
Do you think we'll ever hear any more from the family? Because as I said, everyone was very shocked that Ian came out and spoke publicly today and spoke very kindly about the importance of forgiveness and gratitude and being kind to one another, which I thought was really interesting. Do you think we'll hear from Erin's estranged husband as, this story does continue? Because we know she's guilty. We know she's been sentenced to life for 3 murders and an attempted murder. But many are still questioning, will we ever find out why this ever happened?
I think we probably will hear from him. He did signify early on after she was found guilty that he would actually want to share his story at some point. But remember, he is going to be very conscious of the impact on his children, on his remaining family members, and on himself. So this may be something that can offer him some catharsis, sharing his version of events, because as the court case unfolded, he was asked not to speak, obviously, to the media, but maybe he does have a story that he needs to tell to move forward. Balance that against every time this is back in the media, it re-traumatizes and reopens those old wounds for other victims. So I imagine the family is pulling together now, and any decisions to speak publicly will have to consider the entire family unit.
And Xanthe, the question also now is, do you think Erin Patterson will appeal this sentence?
Well, that's a really interesting question. She has 28 days now to appeal either her conviction or sentence. So I thought the sentence was close. Well, it was close to what the defence asked for, 30 years. It could certainly have been higher. I was expecting closer to 40 years non-parole. If she got parole at all, she may have got life without the possibility of parole. But she did get a parole period, and I think it was a fair sentence. And so I would be surprised if they actually seek leave to appeal the sentence itself, because can't imagine they can argue it's manifestly long and unfairly so. She does still have the right to appeal the convictions, however, and we're yet to hear whether she plans to do so. But if she appeals the conviction, she may as well seek leave to appeal the sentence as well. But I would be surprised. And remember, seeking leave to appeal and being granted leave, very different things. She has to have very strong legal grounds to achieve the right to appeal. And that has to be some sort of legal error that occurred during the case. So we'll wait and see if they choose to seek leave to appeal, and if so, on what grounds.
We really appreciate your analysis. Thanks again for joining us, Xanthe.
Thank you.
That was criminologist Xanthe Mallett. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.